welcome to the Catalyst Creations playlist and to this particular episode being all about my story and going from critical care to create a bit of a catalyst. Let's see what I'm going to be talking about. Let's go! Hello, and welcome to Catalyst Conversations. And today's episode, I am going to be sharing a little segment of my story, a little bit of what happened to me in the past and some of the kind of things that I navigated, some of the things that I learned from that, and everything in between. So it is kind of a bit of a meandering story. It's real and raw, unscripted, and we will kind of see where we go with it. Now, I'm going to take you back to 2004. I am 24 years old. I am a qualified lawyer. I have just qualified. I've got my practicing certificate and I've just secured a brand spanking new job. And I thought, when you train in corporate world, you are put in a position where you are the trainee. And so often what happens, and I'd sort of observed and seen what happened, was that the trainee could become 10 years qualified and still have that trainee label attached to them if they'd stayed in the place that they'd trained. So I'd looked around for a new job. I'd got a new job. I'd just been on a dream holiday to the Caribbean. I had my own house. I was, then got that new job, that sort of newly qualified position job where I was going to develop my career. I was going to move on further. And yeah, everything was pretty sweet. 10 days out from me leaving my current role. And well, it was probably about 2 weeks out from leaving my current role. I started to feel a little bit unwell. I started to have real sort of pains in my back, a lot of lethargy. Got to the point where on the Sunday evening, I went to A&E and I was given some antibiotics. It was flagged as a urine infection and I was sent away, and I was told that if you're no better by Wednesday, then go and see your GP. So I kind of spent those few days, they're quite unclear to me now, but I spent them mostly on the sofa, in pain, not feeling great, was no better by the Wednesday, phoned my GP, and I was sent straight into hospital. My blood pressure was really high, my blood pressure was really low, my resting heart rate was really high, had a temperature, had obviously been on antibiotics for 4 days, I was no better. The doctor flagged it up immediately and sent me off to A&E. And I was put into sort of the medical assessment ward for them to do a few more tests on me. Now, I've got a little black book here. It is the most unsexy notebook that I own because I do like notebooks quite a lot, but this is really unsexy. But this is kind of my dad's log of what happened during that time, because not all of it's crystal clear to me. So sent into hospital by GP Wednesday. Everything seems fine. Everything seems to be pointing to kidney stones. She seems fine. Main concern is her work's leaving due next Wednesday night. Spoiler alert, I didn't make that leaving due the next Wednesday night. So in the early hours of the Thursday morning, my family were asked to come in and to persuade me to have some treatment. Apparently I was refusing treatment. I was not in a place probably to actually make that refusal. I have no recollection of being offered treatment at that stage. And they came in to convince me to have a drain and a neckline fitted so that they could start treatment and do more tests. And that sort of happened during the morning, and I had that fitted. Everybody kind of went home. And then on the evening, I went downhill in a big way. low blood pressure, breathing difficulties, high temperature. Ended up being taken down to theatre to be sedated and ventilated, so that a machine took over my breathing for me. And sort of that first thing there is that sometimes operations have to be cancelled, and they have to be cancelled because people like me have to go into them at that sort of really short notice. I would imagine that there was no operation scheduled at the time that I was taken in there, but these kinds of things do happen, that I had to be taken to that environment. I had to be put into a theatre so that they could send me off to sleep, and so that they could intubate me, so that I essentially had a chance to recover from whatever it was that was happening to me. At that stage, they had very little idea. And then I needed to be moved into intensive care. And when I needed to be moved into intensive care, essentially, there was no room. There was no room at the inn in intensive care. And the doctors have to then make that agonising decision as to who is the least poorly, who is the person that would be most able to handle being transferred to another hospital, potentially, moved to high dependency rather than intensive care. The allocation was that there was nobody in a position to be out of intensive care medicine, but that there was somebody who would manage a move to another hospital that's probably about 20 to 30 minutes car drive away. And it would take a huge team in order to create that movement and to move the gentleman that did move from the intensive care unit in my local hospital to one that was about 20, 30 minutes away. He needed crash nurses, he needed anaesthetists, he needed all sorts of attendants with him to create that transfer and to free up a bed for me, to which I am incredibly grateful. So that was the Thursday. I'm trying to keep it linear a little bit from the book, but what ensued was that I was then, my family were then told that I was very sick, and that I'd been put on a tilting bed that moves from side to side. Something that has been talked about recently in COVID times have been these tilting beds, and I benefited from those to assist lungs and breathing. I was ultimately diagnosed with acute respiratory distress syndrome, with multiple organ failure, with sepsis, and I think something else, but we may get to that. So I had sepsis. I was given a new treatment that was incredibly expensive, which has since been withdrawn from the market as ineffective, but seems to have worked for me. And yeah, I spent then the next kind of how many days asleep. Quite a few days, week and a half, until the Sunday of the week after. So yeah, a week and a half I spent asleep. And at that point, they started to bring me off the sedation medication, and that's a little bit trippy. That causes a whole load of hallucinations, a whole load of things that happen through conversations that happen. So what's really interesting is that I certainly could hear conversations that were taking place at my bedside. I certainly could hear people chatting around me, and my little brother read like the back pages of the paper to me, and different sort of sports people were brought into those weird hallucinations. Different things that doctors or nurses had said were brought into those hallucinations, and all sorts of things were occurring in my thought cycle that weren't occurring in real life, let's just say. And actually, when you look at that period of time, that sort of 10-day period of time where I was asleep, I was on tilting beds, I was obviously being fed artificially, I was breathing artificially, I was being given that opportunity for my body to heal. Obviously, lots of medication, lots of care, lots of being looked after was occurring. For me, that period of time wasn't difficult at all. I have no recollection of that period of time. It was obviously an extremely difficult period of time for my family to navigate. It was an extremely difficult time for the people around me to navigate. But yeah, in my world, that wasn't something that required any kind of strength, tenacity, bravery, anything like that. That was really the external people to me that had to go through that, and it must have been incredibly horrendous for them at that period of time, where I'm having different beds, I'm being put into different directions to allow my body to heal, to do all sorts of different things with me, to have ongoing physio and doctors around me all of the time, tests continuing to be taken, etc., etc. So one funny story during that period of time was that my dad was taking somebody home, was taking my now husband home one evening after visiting, and he was my boyf at the time, but my husband now. And there was somebody who was inebriated outside of A&E, and he was stood outside a casualty asking if we knew a number for a taxi. Hubby phoned one for him, and it was going to take over an hour. So my dad offered him a lift, asked him where he wanted to go, and he said that he wanted to go to the Turk's Head, a pub, obviously. My dad's put in here, as if he hadn't had enough already. I said I would let him off at the snooker club, and he wanted to pay me for my petrol. I told him that it was okay, I was going that way anyway. When I dropped him off, he emptied his pockets and left £15.80 on the back seat of the car. He could have flown by Concorde for less than half a mile for that money over the distance. So yeah, my dad made £15.80 for an illegal Uber. There was no such thing as Uber then, but obviously that was a thing. So then I started to wake during that period of time. It took a while. It took, a few days for me to actually start to wake up. I had a level of agitation about waking up, and I was taken off being fully ventilated and had a tracheotomy. So I've got a little scar just in here where I was then, a breathing tube was inserted through my neck, and I was transferred to the high dependency unit rather than being in intensive care. And that was the point that as I started to get better, I wanted to get better. I was, really committed to getting better. I was probably overly, I probably had more confidence than I had capacity at that stage. I was still really weak. I obviously hadn't moved my body for a long period of time. I wasn't able to go to the toilet on my own. I wasn't able to go to the bathroom on my own, but I kept wanting to have this breathing tube removed. I kept wanting to go home, and I kept pushing the doctors for that kind of, how long is it going to take me to get better, to get better, to get better. And there was the night of, it was the New York Marathon. Remember, it was the New York Marathon, so it was early on in November, that the 7th of November, that I was asked if I wanted a bath. Now, we can all go and soak in the suds whenever we want. It's something that I still don't take for granted again, because that hospital bath, where they had that capacity on that Sunday evening of 2 nurses to be able to allow me to have that, was the most incredible experience of my life. We're talking 3 weeks probably since I'd last actually had a bath that wasn't a bed bath. And they took me to have that bath, and it was the most beautiful and incredible experience I've ever had. There was no bubble bath, there was no bath bombs, there was no fanfare, there was no bells and whistles around it. It was just a bath, and that bath was the most amazing experience of my life. That bath felt incredible. Not only to be clean, but that people had had the time to do that, that people wanted to do that for me and to use their time in that way, and just to be out of my bed and to be asked to do something that wasn't physio. So the only other times that I'd been allowed out of my bed was that the physios tried to get me into a chair during the day and then to put me back in my bed, and back into a chair, and back into bed, and back into a chair, and we'd do some standing up, and then, you know, ultimately we would learn to walk again, essentially, because my muscles had wasted away to the degree that that was something that I had to relearn how to do and had to start again being able to simply walk. I continued to harass and harangue. I continued to get better, and eventually was put out into the ward so that I was not needed to be in high dependency anymore. I didn't need those ratio of medical professionals to look after me, but I needed to get my strength back. I needed to start to get a little bit stronger and be able to ultimately go home. I remember being allowed home for the weekend. I was really annoyed about it, the fact that they would only let me go for the weekend. But it was, you know, it was better than nothing. And I appreciated that it was better than nothing, and bit their hands off, and was slightly afraid when I actually did get home. Like, what happens if? What happens if something goes wrong? I didn't see this coming in the first place. I didn't see on that Wednesday when I went to the doctors that by the Thursday I would be being intubated and being asleep in hospital. You know, I didn't see that coming. If I hadn't gone to the doctors that day, what would have happened? What would have happened overnight that night? What would have gone on? I'd been a little bit institutionalized into lying very straight in my bed. The nurses liked you to lie straight in your bed, and it was very sort of, we call it intensive care position, very straight in your bed. And yeah, I was a little bit worried about that, and I was a little bit concerned about that. It was the most, you know, it was so hard to get to my own bed. It was so hard to climb the stairs to my own bed. It was so exhausting to get to the top of those stairs. And I went back into hospital then for a few more days, and ultimately I was allowed home on the Thursday of the next week. So I was allowed to go home on the Thursday of the next week. So a month plus in hospital, and was allowed to go home on the Thursday of the next week, which was when kind of my movement forwards needed to really take that momentum, and that choice needed to be made around, you know, you either focusing on the stuff that you can do or focusing on the stuff that you can't do, about looking at the small steps that you can take and how you can create progress in micro movements and be able to start to do those things. So when I first came home, I couldn't be left at home on my own. We had a house with stairs. I wasn't able to get up and down the stairs by myself. I wasn't able to get to the toilet by myself. I wasn't able to pick up the kettle when it had water in it because it was too heavy for me. So I needed to be looked after. And walking to my own front door was exhausting. So I decided that I was going to do a little bit more each and every day. And I knew that it was going to be tiring. I knew that it was going to be tiring me out. I knew that I had to appreciate that there was a boundary here, and that doing too much would set me back. So it was micro steps that I took. It was about really focusing on what I could do. It was about really taking that, right, okay, I'm going to walk to the front door. And then a metre beyond my front door was my front gate. So then I was going to walk to my front gate. Then I was going to walk to next door's front gate. Now we're talking about adding meters here, no grandiose actions. It was going to be the step by step by step. And it took me about a fortnight to be able to walk probably about 400 meters, I think it was, to the shop at the end of the street. And that was a progressive movement of just doing a little bit more, just doing a little bit more, just doing a little bit more. Now, during the time that I was in intensive care, there was somebody else who was young too, somebody else who was in their 20s too. And unfortunately, she didn't come out of the other side of intensive care. She isn't in a position to tell her story at all. And I very much felt that connection. I know that my families had their her family and my family had connected to some degree during the time that they'd spent quite, close to one another with children of a similar age. They got it, they both got what the other were navigating at that point in time. And that, she is somebody that I do think about, and she is somebody that I went to a funeral, and Tracy Chapman's Fast Car was played at a funeral, and whenever that comes on the radio, I think about her, and I think about the fact that she can't do the things that she had dreams and plans to do in her life. And yeah, that is, it's not my burden to bear, it's not my cross to bear, it's not something that that preys negatively on me. It's often a motivation of being able to appreciate stuff and being able to see the things that I can do and the stuff that I can move forwards with. So yeah, it's a period of being incredibly ill gives you a point of reference, and it gives you a point of reflection. And I often talk about that there's two things: there's evolution and there's revolution. So evolution is about changing little things, it's about little movements. Revolution is about everything changing. And sometimes that catalyst is, that everything changes in the blink of an eye. Something might happen. It could well be a absolute curveball that comes out of nowhere and it swipes your legs from underneath you, but everything has changed in that moment. It could be something that you decide to do that does the same thing. Now, that period of time for me was a huge kind of revolution in terms of, right, chin up, girl. What is it that you are all about here? What is it that you're doing? And the cliches can come thick and fast. It teaches you that life actually is too short to sweat about the small stuff, to be asked about all of the different little things that actually are pointless and not worth worrying about. That one of the things that that I absolutely, completely and truly believe is that we're all strong, much stronger than we realise. Now, yeah, you know what? I displayed strength and resilience in order to navigate my way through getting better. But it's nothing that anybody else wouldn't do in that situation. When you're faced with those are the cards that are on the table, that's what you've been dealt. You've got to crack on and do it. So many people said to me, do you ever think, why me? Why not me? What makes me any different? What makes me immune from these things? Why not me? Those are the cards that I was dealt. Those are the things that we have to deal with. And there is absolutely no point in wondering why you were the one that had to do that. The shit stick doesn't just hit people who deserve it. The shit stick hits from all sorts of angles at all sorts of different times. People would call me brave. That's not a word that I resonate with at all, on the basis that it wasn't a choice. It wasn't something that I got to choose whether or not I was going to take that forwards. It was, these are the cards on the table. You've got to look at what those cards are, and you've got to play that hand. And these are the things that you need to move forward from here. Now, yeah, I suppose you could be a victim. You could look at what you can't do. You could live in a fearful way. You could feel that that perhaps there's a long-lasting effect from the things that have happened to you, or you can choose to look at the things that you can do to move forwards. And I'm very much, let's eyeball on what we can do. Let's look at what we can do. Let's look at taking really small steps. Let's look at turning the dial slightly. If we're looking at an extra meter on our walk, if we're looking at being able to do half of the stairs on our own, if we're able to fill the kettle for 1 cup's worth of a drink and be able to pick that up ourselves, then all of that is progress, and all of that is moving towards cumulatively getting better, but also looking towards your future. And some of the things that I decided at that point was that, yeah, life's too short to do things that suck, and to choose what you say yes to, and to value the time that you have and the ways that you want to use that time, because that's down to you. And we can, very much look at just kind of bumbling along, but really, is that what you want to do? There's this in my story, this is like the catastrophic event that happened at the age of 24. I went into intensive care. My income stopped whilst I was there. Obviously, as I said at the beginning, I was serving my notice at that point. I was due to leave 10 days after. So whilst I was still asleep in intensive care, my income stopped. My health was obviously compromised, and I needed to look at a strategic rebuild from that point, and to be able to say, right, okay, so what do I want to do moving from here? I was really lucky that the place that I was due to start my new job had spoken to my dad. He told them what was happening. They'd said that they would hold that position open for me, and that I could go back and start working part-time, which is incredible for a firm that, had no loyalty to me at that point, and weren't in any way needing to do that. I was filling a gap of something that they needed an employee to do that. They needed a bum on seat to do that role. And I started working, yes, part-time, and I was exhausted initially. It was absolutely wiped me out those first days at work. But again, I progressively moved that forwards. I started doing 90 minutes a day, and I was exhausted. And then I would do, I think I did then 2.5 hours a day. Then I did half a day. Then I did like a school day. Then I did 9 till 5. And that progressed from there. But yeah, looking at things and being able to say, you are stronger than you believe you are. And if you either one are put in a position where you need to be strong, it's the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, a woman's like a tea bag, and only her strength is exposed in hot water, kind of thing. And two, if you choose to do something, if you choose to get your teeth into something, you are more capable and able than you will ever realize before you make those choices. So things may happen, and the shit stick may hit you. It may hit you directly, it may hit other people in your world, but being able to have that the outlook of the can-dos and of the progressive tiny tweaks, the tiny steps to move forwards, is a huge one when you're looking at changing things, when you're looking at revolutions or evolutions, however they may turn up for you, and allowing yourself to believe that actually, do you know what, bit by bit, I'll get there. I'll get to where I want to be, but I won't forget the lessons that I've learned along the way. I won't forget the things that I need to know from here, and I will absolutely take that strength on into other areas. So I obviously have my little black book that takes us through day by day what happened, what was going on, and on my desk I still have, and I don't know why I still have it, but I still have the belly button ring that was taken out and put in a tube when I was taken into intensive care. It's quite a nice one. I don't know why I can't just put that back on. It's obviously been in there a lot of years now. Maybe need to clean that up and put it back on. Let me know if you think that that's something that I should do. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that one with you. And, I'm going to talk about lots of my elements of my story throughout these conversations. But I wanted to start there because obviously that one is a biggie. I often think, yeah, but why would anybody care about that? What actually can people get from that? I think if I were to sum it up, the gratitude for the small things, that bath was incredible. Focusing on what you can do, and the small steps to progress are the most impactful. And ultimately, you're so much stronger than you ever believed that you are. So, on that note, I hope that that's given you something to muse over, something to think about.